Hello and welcome to this week's vlog with me, Lisa, on Bobo Bun So Vintage Life. Thanks for joining me. Today I am going to deviate slightly from the usual vintage inspired dressmaking and sewing because, as it says in my channel's strapline, title, whatever, Bobo Bun Sew Vintage and Life, and I absolutely adore history. That's half of the reason that we recreate all these lovely vintage inspired clothes, isn't it? Because of a love of times gone by, a desire to daydream and act out previous times fantasies, pretend that we are they. I've always been this way from being a small child. I was always living in my head. I was either a World War II French resistance fighter, while my parents played golf and I was running through the undergrowth and the trees and hiding from Germans, and or as either a major rider at the Olympics, on my horse, 1930s Germany, or I was one of Pop Larkin's children and in the meadow, or from one of the 40s films. I've always been a bit of a daydreamer. So yes, love wearing the clothes and reenacting, and obviously fascinated by history, always have been. I think that was part of me doing my English degree mixed with history of art, because I could delve far more into the history, through all the literature and the research you had to do. As a family, we always belonged to the National Trust and took our daughters to all the places. We used to belong to English Heritage. So if there's a chance of visiting a great house, or a small house, anything that has a historical story to it, I'm your girl, I'm up for it. So that's what I'm going to be talking about primarily in this video. Our visit to Felbrigg Hall in North Norfolk last week. I did say on last week's video I was about to go and visit, and it's just fascinating. I know you'll love it. The stories and what actually happened on our day, I couldn't wait to share with you. I was absolutely buzzing when I left, and I've had to wait a few days to get the time to actually share it with you and tell you all about it. So yeah, I'm thrilled that I can now impart. What a wonderful day I had. So I shall see you back here in a moment. Now, before I start telling you about Felbrigg Hall, I shall just tell you the dress I'm wearing, because I don't think I've worn this. I've shown you it in progress. So this is the Vintage Vogue, I think it's 8789, but I will pop up the appropriate card. So yeah, made this in this lovely seersucker, which horrendously stretched out at the waist. So I had to take a hell of a lot in on the darts after I'd finished it. At the last minute I thought it'd be rather nice to stick a big bow just between my boobies. And obviously I've got a big rack, so I had to put extra on. And then it's got the tiered patio skirt, which I love for its frou-frou-freeness. It's just swishy and lovely, and I love when you go down the stairs and they swish out. So I'm wearing this to show you today. And then last week, yes, we went to Felbrigg Hall. I allowed myself 2 days off because I was working all weekend, and the Friday, we are having such a heat wave here at the moment in the UK, and Friday was really hot. Both my daughters happened to be around at the same time, so we went to the coast, to Southwold in Suffolk, which is the next county on from us, where we used to live near, and had the most marvellous day, eating and walking and talking, and even found a little vintage fair. And this beautiful little jacket, it's not vintage, but it's a Noah reproduction of a vintage piece. To me it looks like an Edwardian overjacket, or even a Victorian one. It's got all these beautiful frills to the body, and the collar turns back, real standy up sleeves. So it just about fits me. I mean, that was a steal of a price. Noah it would probably have been about 120, I should imagine, when it was new. So it just about fits me, but made for a much shorter person, as most clothes are, so the bust darts are up here and the bodice could be a bit longer. But I know I'll be able to wear it, but I'm definitely going to copy it to make one that fits me better, so that would be really exciting. And I found one other lovely thing that I have been looking for a while. I can't put it up because, I am superstitious, but this parasol, this vintage parasol, just absolutely beautiful. Keeps the sun off. I'll put a little bit up. I'm not putting it all the way up. So had that on our beach day, and then on the way home we passed the Suffolk, what's it called, the Southwold Flower Company, just fields of beautiful flowers, and they're open all around the year, and you just go in, like the pick your own fruit we have in this country, you can go and pick your own flowers. So we had a glorious time there, and I've got some just behind me. We filled 4 vases up here when we got home. They're all getting a bit, yeah, sad now, but they're still there to remind us of a glorious day, and I took lots of photos. So that's what we've got. And then I've got one other thing I wanted to tell you. I'm super excited about this. Tomorrow evening, Millie and I are going to be sleeping in a field in a shepherd's hut that's just got all these lovely vintage blankets and whatnot. No Wi-Fi, so we'll take our knitting and reading and books of planning and chatting and just thinking, and lovely food to cook outside. So as a treat, she's booked us a night in this shepherd's hut, and I'm responsible for food and beverages. So, oh God, I'm so excited to be doing that. So we're having a little mini getaway. So I'm sure you'll be seeing photos and hearing more about that as we go on. So without further ado, let me tell you about Felbrigg Hall. Now, I know that some of you that follow me here, you know, you're in Australia, you're in America, you're not all English, so you're not necessarily going to know what the National Trust is. I mean, you may do, you visited, but I will tell you. So sorry if I'm telling you something you already know, but it does help. So we went to visit Felbrigg Hall, of which there are various stately homes, and you'll get smaller cottages, you know, workmen's houses, that type of thing, and they all come under the umbrella of the National Trust, which is an amazing scheme. I can't remember, I think it might have even been from about 1860. This amazing lady called Octavia, might be Hall, I can't remember now. I research all this stuff, and some stays in my brain, some doesn't. She was one for social reform and cultural diversity, and for people being outside, you know, the greater good of, you know, the feeling of well-being you get of being in outside places. And with 2 other people, she set up the National Trust as it evolved to acquire homes that were going to be culturally significant for the nation to enjoy, rather than them being knocked down or to fall into disrepair. And when we had this, I mean, from the First World War really, but definitely by the Second World War, how estates passed from family to family or were sold on, people couldn't afford to keep them, especially those who were inheriting them, because the death duties tax, the inheritance tax, became so high that they couldn't then run the estate. They hadn't got half the workers they had, you know. People had got greater freedoms, there was far more work, so people didn't live on an estate, you know, and, you know, either marry within that estate or stay single the whole life, and the whole community was focused on supporting that estate. That way of life was just going. So from the sort of 20s onwards, a lot of these big houses were sold to the National Trust to save them. And when the National Trust took them on, they didn't then have to pay the inheritance duty, so the family didn't and the trust didn't. Many houses were sold, you know, with the, gosh, my brain thinking of words, you know, all the fixtures and fittings intact. Felbrigg was sold with everything intact. Another amazing one called Tintersfield, which I went to see with my love. We had a weekend down Bath and Bristol area, because I really want to see Tintersfield, and that was a house where the owner had died, I think might be this century. It wasn't long ago he died, and it was just a living museum because he hadn't gone in most of the house for so long. So, you know, they remained as the Victorian rooms as his family had lived, with just tons and tons of stuff. You know, it's just like stepping right back into the past, you know, as if the people just walked out the door. So, I mean, that was amazing. I always go and see somewhere, wherever we are. So Felbrigg was left to the National Trust in 1969 by the Last Squire. There's various suggestions, because he remained unmarried all his life, and there's suggestions that he was gay. There was a film made by Stephen Fry for part of the LGBTQ. I think I can't remember if it was linked with a pride or something like that, but it caused so much contention. because a lot of people said he never wanted to come out during his time. He was a very shy, humble man, and it wasn't right to out him now, you know, as part of the trust, whereas Stephen Fry argued it's that type of mentality that has put gay people back all these years, you know, and caused so much repression and fear. And I'm kind of on half and half, because I agree that the man didn't have the choice in the matter, but yes, I'm all for let's be progressive and let's move forwards with our thinking. So yeah, just a little aside there. So the last squire, he died in 1969, and he'd already left the House of Trust in 1941 because he was a historian and a writer. You know, he knew the way forward. He devoted his life to the Hall and to the County of Norfolk. So I want to tell you about this family because there's madness, there's ghosts, there's just beauty, there's just lovely stories. It's a house that you go around and visit and you absolutely feel the people who lived there. And there were just three families that lived in the Hall from when it was first built in the 1600s. They say there was a excuse me, there was a Tudor house originally built there, but the house that we see now was first built in 1600, the first part, and I don't think any other modernisations were done after the mid-1800s. So it stays from between those periods. So it starts off as a Jacobean hall. So Jacobean being James I's rule after Elizabeth I. So it's that era when the first colony, you know, was created in America, Jamestown. You've got the gunpowder plot. So just to sort of put it on its timeline, when this hall first came to being, and it's owned by the Wyndham family, and it goes through various Wyndhams. And then we've got the mid-1700s, William Wyndham II. He went on a grand tour of Europe, and he came back with amazing things which are in the house. So I'll tell you some of the things that he brought back, so fascinating. And it's said to be him that haunts the library, so I should also tell you about that. So he was a real inventor, explorer, very educated man, a bibliophile, so very interesting man there. It goes through some other parts of the family, and then there's one that was called Mad Wyndham. Apparently he got that name when he was at Eton, and we're talking early 1800s, I believe. Yeah, when did he have the estate? I'm looking at my dates here. 1854 to 1863 had the estate, but it just declined rapidly into disrepair. He was a spendthrift, and basically the estate went to the banks because of his debts. But he was quite happy, I think, because he really was very eccentric. He loved to dress up as a train guard. Don't know where he got the uniform from. So you think, like, the squire at the Hall dresses up a train guard, and then he used to like to go down to the platform, and he'd keep blowing the whistle whenever he wanted, which meant trains were pulling out of the station when they shouldn't, and it caused loads of rumpus. So yeah, he lived up to Mad Wyndham, and then apparently once the house was taken by the bank and sold on to the Ketten family, who were merchants in Norwich, so obviously they were then going up the social ladder. He was really happy. He got a guard's van, which he painted scarlet red, and a carriage, and apparently he used to drive that like a complete lunatic. It says in the description, ferociously around the country lanes, but probably as happy as a pig in muck, I should think. So yeah, an interesting character then there. And then it goes over to the Ketten family, John and Rachel Ketten, who had 7 children. They had 5 daughters and 2 sons. The oldest son never inherited. He was disinherited. I don't know why, but he was disinherited, so it went to the younger son. So when the father died, the mother maintained the estate till he was old enough, because I think he was about 16 and at Eton. They all seem to go to Eton or Harrow. He was at Eton, and then when he was old enough, he inherited. He never married, and he lived there with 2 of his younger sisters, Gertrude and Marion, who have always fascinated me, so I can't wait to tell you about them. So they all lived together at the Hall till their premature death, and then it was passed on. I'm trying to think who it's passed on to. I think there was a nephew, yeah. So then it was Wyndham Kramer, who was a nephew of his. So it came through the family, but you know, it kind of deviated off on the family tree. and they were the last family to live there. He married Emily, and then they had their 2 sons, one of who was the last squire. So that's kind of a potted history of the people who lived in the house. Now I want to take you through on our day and what we found out about them and what we saw. So Felbrigg Hall is somewhere that we visited lots as a family. We used to take the girls there when they were little. It's just really good belonging to these places, because not only are you contributing to them, it's a cheaper day out. And last week I did join again, so it's just like £6 a month, which pays for the car park there, let alone the visit. And then I can go wherever I want all around the country as many times as I want. So I'm contributing to them by paying, and I get a lot out of it too. So we used to belong so we could just go and walk around the amazing woodlands. I mean, this is a 400-acre estate. And then there's beautiful gardens, you know, kitchen gardens, of which I have shown you on here before. So they're just wonderful places to visit just for the outdoor stuff, let alone, and then, you know, going inside. So I decided that day I was going to join. So I was going with a friend who, it turns out, even though she doesn't live far, had never been in the house. She's been around all the grounds loads. So it was a really exciting day for her. And I couldn't wait to show her inside a house that I've loved, because Felbrigg Hall has always felt like a family home to me. It might be grand, but it's not grand on the ridiculously huge scale. But you can really feel that people lived here and loved living here. It's got just a genuine warmth. So I've always really loved this place. So to share it with Michelle was just a joy, and to see her delight was another thing also. So I'm filling out the membership, then she walks up, and I was having a lovely chat with the ladies. They were complimenting me on my dress, and then I'm showing them my links, because they might come to my sewing classes. Another one knits, we were talking about knitting. They were just so lovely and welcoming. And then I went back to put my car park ticket in the car, came back, and it turns out that they'd waived Michelle's entrance fee, being really kind and lovely. So yeah, that was just so sweet for them. And all the guides, the people that work at the front desk are paid, but around the house they're all volunteers. And we've worked out that we need to volunteer when we get a bit older, because then, and I did ask somebody, I said, you know, if you're a volunteer, can you go in all the places that you're not supposed to go? Because they're the places you want to see, right? The doors that are shut, you want to go behind them. And they said, yes, you can. So I'll definitely be volunteering, I think, one day. You know, maybe when I get into the retirement age. We saw there was an attics and cellars tour on that day, but it was fully booked, so we'll go back again for that. One of the guides said it's not to be missed, because he said there's stuff up there that's just pristine. It is proper, how the family just dumped everything up in their attics. And he said the trust have set the rooms so they look Victorian, but there's stuff up there going up there to the 17th, 18th century, you know, clothes, books, furniture, and he said it's in mint condition. It's just fascinating. So really excited about doing that another time. I think good old nosy about. And we've worked out our strategy, because I hate going on guided tours and it's all go along at our speed. So we've worked out we're going to be at the front of the guided tour, so we get there first, and then we're going to filter towards the back so we get a bit longer at each bit rather than we get rushed through. That's our strategy. Anyway, so onto the house. So we walk in and we go into the morning room. I've put up a floor plan. I blooming love a floor plan. I always think it's fascinating seeing how a house is laid out. So we go into the morning room, which has got loads of beautiful paintings. And I wanted to show Michelle Emily Kramer, or it's Ketten Kramer. They had to take on the Ketten name as a condition of inheriting the house. So, and her husband Wyndham. And I love this picture of Emily. I think she's just got the most gentle, kind, lovely face. And then we turned to her husband Wyndham, and it made me laugh, because Michelle just looked and went, well, he doesn't look like much fun, does he? It's a bit of a killjoy. He might have been, who knows? I haven't read anything to say that he was. But these were painted in 1930. And then I couldn't find it on this visit, but I've seen it before, a most beautiful black and white photo of Emily at age 18 as a debutante in her white court gown. And it's just a beautiful photo. It was on the edge of a piano one visit. And they did tell us, I asked where it was, but we'd already missed it, so we didn't go back through to see it. But it was lovely seeing her as a very young girl, you know, to this older lady. I'm just looking at my floor plan here. When we went into the drawing room, there was a photo of Queen Mary, who was married to George V. So we're thinking Queen Victoria's son, who was the next ruler, First World War. Yeah. Sorry, just keep timelining it. There was a picture of Queen Mary that had been signed by her, and there was also a teapot that had been gifted. And one of the guides told us in a later room that apparently Emily Ketten Kramer and her were best friends, because it did seem a very personal kind of gift and present, you know, photos. So it's interesting, you know they've got aristocratic connections, you know, court connections. She might have even been a lady in waiting. I can't find anything from researching. And after we'd gone in the morning room, we went over to the Great Hall, and they've got all these amazing, I can't remember if it's in that one or the dining room, and it's definitely got it in the cabinet room, these amazing Rococo ceilings. Just absolutely stunning. And I know they said in the cabinet room to then put in a bay window, they had to copy a lot of the plasterwork, and it apparently just slightly changes in colour. And I think in one of the bedrooms upstairs, they'd removed one of the Rococo ceilings, you know, sort of in the 19th century, and it's just a make do amend, waste not, you know, everyone's been doing it all the time. They brought that ceiling and installed it up in the bedroom, you know, so there's this most beautiful ceiling up in the bedroom, you know, of all the relief flower work and leaves and fruit and whatever. It's just absolute delight. They always remind me of some of the bits hanging down here, like an upside down Christmas cake. So the Trust have set up the dining room as the Ketten family would have had it in the 1860s, 1870s. They ran a lot of shoots, so, you know, it's probably set up for a shooting lunch, something like that. And when we went through to the drawing room where I said the Queen Mary photo is, on the wall was a little bookcase with quite a few books that had all been written by the last Squire. He was Robert Ketten Kramer. I'm trying to remember all the names. So I'm holding my pen. Used to this the whole time I was lecturing, I'd always be like fiddling with a pen. I've started to do it again. I should put that down. So there was various books he'd written on the history of Norfolk, you know, other people. I can't remember what all the books were about. And how the room was set with the comfy sofas all around the fireplace, you know, and family photos around, very much reminded me of the film A Handful of Dust that had got, you know, the 1930s shabby sitting room. My friend said, I can't believe I've only just been rereading and then watched again Remains of the Day. And she said, this is so Remains of the Day here. I recommend, highly recommend watching it. I had to read the novel, I think it might have been on the first year of my English degree, and God, it felt turgid. It's one of those books that is really hard to read, but at the end you're really glad you've read it because it's so fascinating. And the reason it's turgid is because this man's reflecting on a life, not even half lived, quarter lived. You know, he realises he could have had a better life. So it's got this sort of oppressive, depressive gloom over it, but it's fascinating, about a butler in a grand house. And yeah, his lovely lord, he wanted to collaborate with the fascists. There you go, 1930s England and some of its joys there. But anyway, their drawing room very much reminded me of those things. And on a desk in the bay window was a lovely portrait of the youngest son who died in 1941 at the Battle of Crete. He was called Richard. And it's him on a horse, and we were told later that that was the last horse that was in the stables at the house. His horse was called Jester. So it was lovely seeing him on the horse. And I found on my search a photo of him with two donkeys, which reminded me of when we used to take Rosie and Millie there when they were little. We would always go across to a paddock where there were two donkeys. We've always loved donkeys and one day hoped to have our own along with sheep, but that opportunity never came. We had a meadow at the back of our house that we thought maybe one day we'd be able to buy, and yeah, ex-husband decided he was going to be a philanderer, so we had to sell the family home and no longer live in the countryside. I don't have any regrets there, but it would have been nice to have had donkeys and sheep, but we still visited these ones. Told a little bit of an aside, but never mind. So that was that room. And then I'm looking at the floor plan again. And then we went through to the cabinet room, which was, we're going now back to the 1750s, yeah? When William Wyndham II had his grand tour of Europe, and then he brought back all sorts of artefacts, you know, from the East and from Italy, etc. Yeah, and that's the room where they'd extended the Rococo ceiling out into the bay window. Later on, I'll tell you about the Chinese wallpaper. You know, it's hand-painted Chinese wallpaper from that era. It was just astounding. So I'll show you that and tell you about that. And when we came out of the Chinese bedroom and we go into like the service hall, and those bits always fascinate me. The behind the scenes, you know, how the servants were meant to move easily and secretly around the house, not to disturb the family or the guests, but to get the food there, to be there in time. That was the other thing, with all the beautiful bell pulls by most of the fireplaces, I think in every room, you know. And then downstairs we saw where all the bells are, you know, and they say like rose bedroom or drawing room or whatever. So, you know, the bell would go down the servants' quarters and they'd know where they'd got to scuttle off to. And we decided our request. So I was going to give the bell pull a tug and shout gin and tonic, and also another ball of wool if I was knitting and ran out of wool. And Michelle was going to call for a book. And yeah, I don't know which drink she was after. She's not a drinker, so she wouldn't have had a gin and tonic with me, but God, she loved those bell pulls. And I said, I think you should make your own. By the fireplace, you could make a beautiful bell pull. She lives in a beautiful tiny little cottage, so totally out of keeping with the cottage, and it'd be really funny. And I thought they could even rig up a little bell. So yeah, we love the bell pulls for the staff. So we went round that back and then we climbed the stairs, and the stairs were just beautiful. We had to wait quite a while because the poor elderly gentleman, his legs had got frozen at the top and he couldn't kind of reprogram his brain to get his feet going. So we just patiently waited down the bottom, taking it all in. And then we went up the stairs, and the first room we came into was the library. And my youngest daughter Millie, she is very sensitive to spirits, and she told me before about the woman that she knew was in the house, and she'd not told me where she sensed her, and she said it makes her uncomfortable, this woman there. And we knew nothing about the library, and interesting, I didn't feel anything, but the minute we walked into the library, and you've got to remember we weren't told, but we walked straight in, and Michelle immediately went, oh, she said it's the library. And her heart apparently was going ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And she said she was getting, if anyone's watched BBC's Ghosts, which is just, please try and watch it if you can, it's just hilarious and fabulous. It's the Horrible Histories team. It just, I think we've watched it 3 times now because we love it. And there's a witch in there who's a ghost, Mary, and trying to get out the owners, she just walks along saying, get out, get out, get out, get out. And Michelle said she'd got serious Mary get out vibes. It's all she could feel. And we'd walked past this long reclining chair, and then there was a secret doorway, and I said, do you want to come through here? And she said, not on your life, I'm not going anywhere near there. It's this side of the room that I'm getting the serious, I want you out. That's all I'm getting. Nothing evil, just I don't want you in here. And a few rooms on, we were talking to a guide, and he said that William Wyndham II, who had built the library, and they're his books, and he died before he had time to read them all. I mean, some of them he'd bought them from the 1500s. They're really old books. They're all bought to be read. And he would love to lay in that chair where we were getting the get out vibes. That's where he'd lay to read. And the stories are that that's where he likes to be. And apparently visitors have felt their handbags get knocked and various things. And various guides and volunteers say that they've sensed him there. And apparently he died... he had another house in Pall Mall in London, and he was returning back to it. I think this is early 1800s. And he was returning back to it, and he saw a friend's library on fire in their house. So he ran in because they had some valuable manuscripts, you know, precious things. So he ran in to rescue them. And apparently he fell and knocked his hip, which caused a tumour. So he died not long after. So died before his time, saving books, and apparently he stays in his library. And as we were talking to the guide about how Michelle had got these serious get out, you know, this I really don't want you in my room feeling, a lady behind us, and they were, you know, about our age, she said that's exactly what my husband felt. We had to get out there quickly too. So, is there truth in it or not? I think there is truth in it. I believe that buildings retain impressions of people, or that some people do just stay there. It's like a film overplaying. And you imagine this man, he's got all this hoi polloi just traipsing through his library where he went for peace and quiet. My God, if I had a sewing room and I had endless people I didn't know walking through it, I'd be shouting, get out. So yeah, I totally get why William felt like that. So after the library, with much relief, we stepped into this really lovely little room that is called the grey dressing room, but it's got a slipper bath and it looks like a big old boot. Lovely little fireplace. So I took some pretty photos of that room. It didn't look a pleasure to get in this bath. It looked quite uncomfortable, but there we go. And I guess all the maids that had to bring that hot water up as well, less of a pleasure. And then the next room after that was the yellow bedroom, which was kind of okay. We preferred the next room, the rose bedroom. But we had a lovely chat with the guide in there. That's what I was telling you, who told us, and he recommended us going into the attics and whatever. And then after that was a red bedroom and then a Chinese bedroom. So there's only 4 bedrooms up there, not many. The Ketten family, all their children slept in the attics, even when they're older. So I shall tell you about why that's significant in a minute. Sorry, I'm pointing at you. So we get into the Chinese bedroom, and it was around the time that we were all hanging on to see if Boris would actually resign. So we had a bit of a political chat with the chap in there. He was clearly a socialist like us. So yeah, we had an interesting conversation, a bit funny. But the room was just amazing. So I'll show you, yeah, the wallpaper. All hand painted wallpaper from China that William II, Wyndham II had brought back. So we're thinking late 1700s he got this paper, he had it commissioned, it was hand painted in China, and rather than it being sent on a roll, obviously we got all of this from the guides, they went over and above to tell us more about the history of the place. It was made into squares, so it was easy to be sent, so you'd obviously got to match all of these squares up. So I had to pay a fortune for someone from London, who's very skilled at putting this type of paper up. And apparently they just boarded up a window so that then they could paper around, and turn the room from what it had originally been, turn it into a bedroom. But they didn't know about damp and airflow and whatever, so it did ruin a lot of the paper, having just boarded it. So I think many years later to carefully take those parts down, seal where the window had been properly, and salvage. And they probably had some bits left over, whatever. So yeah, very, very expensively papered room, and it was just exquisite. It was beautiful, but the Chinese figures above the bed would have really put me off. I was thinking in candlelight with the shadows. It's not a room I'd have wanted to sleep in, but there we go. My iPad keeps switching off the floor plan. It really helps me work out where we were going. So after that, we went down a whole corridor and we came to a bathroom. Apparently one of the ladies had said, I'm not moving in unless you have a bathroom. I think it was probably Ketten Kramer. And the floor was amazing. It was cork with all nursery. We saw like Georgie Porgy and Puddin' and Pie and Little Bo Peep, and they were all printed, so they think it was probably a nursery before it became a bathroom. But that was just beautiful, this floor. So we walked all along that back hall, and then we went down the wooden stairs down to downstairs, where we then came into what's called the bird corridor. So it was all flagstones where the servants would have moved about. We looked into the butler's pantry, which I would love to have gone in, and there was a box, and it said, I have to look on the pictures, it said something like Knightsbridge sperm. I just remember it said sperm, and I'm like, what? I was thinking maybe it's to impregnate, the cows on the estate or something, and you get syringes of sperm. Why? I mean, but my friend said sperm whales, that's what the candles were made out of. So yeah, I don't know if candles, being sold nowadays, it said sperm candles. It's definitely if they're not from Wales, because that's not good at all. I'm a vegetarian, so I wouldn't be buying sperm whale candles, but just calling them sperm candles. Sorry, I digress, yeah. Right, so back to history. Who needs to know about sperm and candles? After that we went into the kitchen, which was an amazing huge space and really light. A lot of them were sort of, you know, down low, so that all looked onto the main courtyard, which is huge, that had all like the dairy and the wash house and larders and bake houses and whatever. So the staff looked onto this big green area of the courtyard. But I didn't like the orangey coloured walls. I'd have definitely painted the walls another colour, but I guess with cooking, you know, and fats, smoke and things wouldn't stain the walls. But yeah, the orange I thought was a bit... So I'd have redecorated. I'd have found a nice Farrow Hall colour, I think, for that. Then we came along and I was able to just peer through some of the side doors that were locked. And then we walked along the back corridor. I'm just trying to think, it's called the South Corridor. So it was coming along to where the servants' hall was and the tenants' waiting room, the gun room. And all along there were all these leather buckets with the initials R.A.K. on them. And we found out later that they were Rachel Ketten's. These are the people that had inherited after Mad Wyndham had to have the bank take over the house, so the Ketten family. And apparently Rachel Ketten, she was terrified of fire because I think her husband, it might have been her husband, or it was somebody who was experimenting with fireworks. Can't remember who now. I'd have to go back to extensive notes. But they were experimenting with fireworks, which blew the roof off and caused a huge fire. So you can understand why she was quite worried about fire. So she'd had masses of buckets, all with her initials, which made us giggle because we'd already started to read Rachel's diaries at that point. There were some excerpts of her diary there, and we'd got the feeling for who Rachel was. And yeah, we started to think she's maybe a bit paranoid. Hold on a moment. So I'm getting a bit dry with all this talking. So Rachel is the one who I said had 7 children, and her husband was always out on shoots. Now they had some of her diaries, and they have got her diaries that she wrote from 1863 to 1870. Now we were very lucky at the end because we were able to read some excerpts, and my friend loved how one bit would say, you know, went out in the carriage on a blackberrying picnic, and they were all places that we know around Norfolk and Michelle goes to. And she did say to me the next day, you know, she's got to do loads of boring paperwork, and she said, I'd rather get in the carriage on a blackberrying picnic. So I think we'll have to have one of those in honour of Rachel. But there was excerpts. I think I looked at one bit and she'd just written a very miserable day indeed, and we just lost it laughing, because before then it had been, you know, why it was miserable, or the weather was awful, it was gloomy, you know, she just seemed to have a negative turn about her. And when all she could write in her diary one day was a very miserable day indeed. Weather or family, I don't know. But yeah, bless her. We did apologise to her for laughing. And I wanted to show Michelle her daughters that had run the hall, because it's very unusual for Victorian women to be independent like they were. And they've always fascinated me. All these years I've been drawn to these 2 Ketten sisters, and I couldn't find their photos anywhere. So when we left, I asked the ladies that we'd seen at the entrance, you know, who we'd done our booking with, and they phoned up the house team, and one of the curators came down, this lovely young woman, and she said, they're my special area of interest. I absolutely love them. And apparently she dressed up as one of the sisters with her friend quite a few years ago, and they'd reenacted various parts. So she took us, moved you know, the cords, and took us in to show us the photos. And Michelle was talking about how fascinated she was by their mum's diaries, and said, you know, are they available to read? And I'm not kidding you, before we got home that night, she had already emailed Michelle all the diaries, and my friend said they are the most fascinating reading. She's going to print them off so we can read them. Just felt people went over and above that day, you know, to really embrace our enthusiasm and giving us more insights. It was just, it made it really, really special. So yeah, we read Rachel's diaries, and so telling you about us going back to find about the Ketten sisters. As I said, John and Rachel, they didn't inherited their first son, so it went to their second son, Robert. They only had 2 sons. The other daughters had married, and he lived there with his 2 sisters, Marion and Gertrude. and apparently they were really strong, intelligent characters, you know, and he was quite a quiet sort of soul, and I think it's very much them that ran the estate and the house, because when they died, I think they were early 40s when they died, apparently he became a recluse. He found it very hard to cope, you know, and the estate ran into total disrepair till it was sold on to his nephew. You know, it was moved on to his nephew in 1923, the last, you know, family to have the hall. But there's reason his sisters died. I mean, there's so many pictures around, and they dressed, you know, like you see twins who are dressed identically. In all the photos, they're dressed identically, which is always a little bit strange, but there we go. But they were obviously very close. But they slept up in the attics. And I really want to find my note on this because it really is interesting. Not interesting for them, it's very tragic for them. But in the attics where they slept, they think they had been poisoned by the toxic wallpaper up there, because it had arsenic as the main ingredient for the shade of green that it was called Paris green. This shade was very, very popular in Victorian times. It was a fashionable Victorian pigment, and it was used in ink and textiles. So you imagine over the years, and they slept in the attics. Goodness knows why they still can sleep up there, but they did. And they were obviously inhaling, and they died within years of each other. And they think that's what caused their death. It was mainly the elderly or young children that died, you know, from the toxic wallpaper. Apparently William Morris, he stopped using it in the 1870s, this arsenic pigment in his wallpaper, but he still didn't believe. He did it because of common belief, but he said he didn't think it was of any harm to anybody. He thought it was the water, but the water obviously was a problem as well with cholera, but I think it was arsenic and cholera. Neither of them are too good a mix. So that was the demise of those. But I've always found them fascinating that these two women, they didn't marry either out of choice or they didn't find the right person. And so they could live a thoroughly independent life, all under the protection of their brother. Yeah, and obviously they then supported him. So very, very modern and interesting. I don't know, I've got a special place in my heart for these two sisters. And then when we come through, there was a lovely sign in the last room. It's like the workshop room. There was a lovely sign where they'd obviously started probably during the 30s that people could have visits through the park driving through. And I love how it says on the sign, but charabancs not welcome. My friend drives what she calls a charabanc. It's a really old Volvo estate, so she said I would have been welcome. Bob is a charabanc, Bob's that car. But yeah, no hoi polloi obviously, just people in nice cars are obviously more well-to-do. And what else did I want to tell you? So then we'll come to the last family, of which I've told you snippets. I remember going on a lovely family day where the last squire and Robert and his brother Richard, they had various toys for their childhood. They'd set it out, you know, as if a mother was sitting at the chair, the children's toys were there and that type of thing. You know, they made it look as if they were still living there. That was quite a few years ago, I remember going there. Anyway, so there's quite a few family photos around. He joined the RAF, and in 1941 he died in the Battle of Crete, which obviously was quite a ferocious battle with the Luftwaffe bombing the island, and the RAF was stationed there. So that's where he died, and his older brother Richard was absolutely bereft. And in the bookshop we read a book which we will buy, his history of Felbrigg, and we read this excerpt where he said he can't read, or he couldn't read his brother's letters for the amount of sorrow that they brought back. They're obviously incredibly close, and I suppose, you know, when you're on this 400-acre estate, miles from anywhere, you know, that is going to be your childhood buddy. I mean, obviously if you loathed each other it'd be tricky, but they obviously got on very well. So at the end of the war, to commemorate the end of the war and the passing of his brother, he made the Victory V avenue of tree, you know, Victory V avenue of trees at the back of the house. So that's really beautiful and poignant. And it was also 41 he went and spoke to the trust in 1941, you know, to talk about moving over. So I imagine then he knew his brother had died, that he wouldn't have any children. There was no one to take the house on. So he wanted to safely pass it into the hands of the nation where they would enjoy and look after Felbrigg Hall. And he was a historian. He wanted to preserve history. And when we go over to the church, I know when we've gone, we love to go and see where all the lambs are out in the fields, and you walk through all the sheep and the lambs to the church, which obviously all the staff and family would have gone to. And there's a lovely memorial for Richard in there. Obviously all his family's tablets are in there, but yeah, you could see their history there. So yeah, we had the most marvellous day, just buzzing, and just how kind, helpful and interesting, and we had lots of giggles and lovely time sitting outside having our lunch later, and yeah, just a pure joy. So I really hope you've enjoyed my deviation, me sharing a little bit of social history. I love the stories of real people. You know, you visit their homes and they're not grand people, they just live like us. Yeah, not so much like us in that they go to grander places and different education, that type of thing, but yeah, all the same fears and worries and losses and, you know, madness. And maybe I'll come back and haunt somebody, who knows? So I might haunt my sewing room in the future. But anyway, it's been lovely sharing this with you. I've got something really exciting planned for next week. I'm even looking at it. It's a little project I'm working on, so I can't wait to share that with you. So it'll be a little bit of craftiness, and then we'll move forward with the sewing again, I imagine. So thanks for joining me today. And if you enjoy my videos, then please subscribe so you don't miss out, and comment and have a chat with me. I always get back to you. If it's not immediately, then it's later. So thank you once again, and a cheery goodbye. Have a lovely time, whatever you're up to, and I shall see you next week.